center of the bleachers with everyone going crazy and clapping and the PA system going and all that stuff. That simple distance causes it to drop off substantially to the point that it just sort of becomes part of the background and certainly doesn't exceed those standards, those significance thresholds. Isn't the issue mainly with the visitors' bleachers and the homes right behind them the fact that the bleachers themselves are open in the back?
It is at this point. In fact, if you look at the table in the EIR, that actually shows not just the 24-hour CNEL average of the noise levels, but actually just the hourly event noise levels from existing conditions to the project conditions.
So this is for those of you who might want to look, this is on page 113, table D9, 4D9.
With the addition of the sound wall, that actually would reduce the noise levels that are received at those nearest homes during a varsity game. The event noise level during an hour-long high school game would actually reduce the noise levels received at those homes during that compared to existing conditions when they play their game in the afternoon, during the daytime. But that would actually, with the added PA system, the added attendance and everything like that, with the installation of that sound wall, it would actually reduce it by not quite 1 decibel, but it's not going to be increasing it during that event.
We've answered it, or if you have a follow-up question.
Did we clarify, and did we answer both those questions that you?
Well, I know at the games, a lot of people stand and they don't sit in the bleachers, and so you are going to have those people that the sound is, there's not going to be the wall there. It's just going to go because they do stand on the sidelines. And so, and I still, I'm not a sound expert, so I can see the sound. I just thought that the wall was going to be a little bit further out.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So your point is that people will actually not entirely be within the visitors' bleachers, but will be standing along the side and clapping and yelling and stomping their feet. So my question to Phil would be, could the noise that would be generated by, or what are we talking about, 50 people or maybe 20 or 30, a scattering of people along there, could that possibly be loud enough if they're clapping and stomping their feet, etc., to be at all similar to the sound that's in the visitors' bleachers, given the way that we have assumed people pretty tightly packed and all going ape at the same time?
Again, the noise we analyze for the noise in the bleachers, it includes that the clump of the mass of the people that come together, and that is actually what generates the greatest amount of noise. It's the density of the people, and we assume in the report, you can see the amount of minutes we assume that they're going to be yelling at the exact, absolute loudest voice they can. The times they'll be just yelling normally loud, and then loud voices and things like that. And that is what would generate the greatest sound. If we have 50 people over on, on each, 25 on each end, whatever, standing and yelling and things like that, the fact that they would be not in a solid clump and making a single point source of noise, again, it's the distance factor and the directionality. If they were all standing in a clump facing one house and all yelling at the top of their voice, that most certainly would cause a discernible increase in the noise level in that person's backyard. But I think that the assumption is that they're going to be facing the field and making their noise and directional noises toward the field. Does that make sense?
I've heard from some community this idea that you'd have 3,000 people attend this event. Were there numbers? Two questions around this that I've heard is, one is the factoring in the number of participants. So when you say, the noise wraps around or the noise dissipates, is it grounded on several thousand people that we're looking at shouting?
Yes.
And also the second piece, I'm sorry, but the second piece is the neighboring high school, which De La Salle, and there was concern that you're going to have simultaneous noise, and that escalate. They already have this noise, which they expect, and then there's more simultaneous noise. So it's just a couple more noise questions, if those make sense.
Sure. The answer to the number of spectators question is shown in table 3-2. That's the table you should be most familiar with, because that describes the events on the site that are going to be taking place with the lights in place, and then there's a column that says either yes or no, PA system, on or not. And so what we assumed for those 6 main varsity football games per year was that there would be between, what the site estimated, and this is consistent with other high school sites that have similar facilities, that have a similar scale. So they've never experienced this yet, that's my understanding, but they've said, boy, with all the new facilities, we think we might get between 500 and 1,000 total spectators. And we've taken the very conservative assumption to say that a large part of those would be visitors, probably more than will actually be visitors, depending on where they're originating from. And so they've said 500 to 1,000. We said take the highest number, take 1,000, and then go about figuring out how many of those would be on the home side, how many would be on the visitor side. There are 2 games which it was speculated that if they should make it into the playoffs, a couple times a year in the best years, and I don't know how often that happens, but let's say they do really well with the new lights, there could be between 1,000 and 2,000. A little bit like how city planners don't plan parking lots at supermarkets or at shopping centers for the day after Thanksgiving or the day before Christmas. We decided not to include those 2 potential nights, games, as our measurement of peak, because that's sort of a speculative thing. It's a one-off. It might happen, it might not. Everyone would know when it was going to happen. It'd be a really big deal. And so we really just kept to looking at those 6 nights of the varsity football games as the measure of whether there would be an impact or not. And so the 3,000 question, I don't really know where 3,000 came from. Someone speculated 3,000. What we have here is the possibility that for a playoff game, if everybody who had any connection to the school came out, there might be 2,000 or so. And even if you had more seats, which there might actually be more seats than that in total, but the idea is there's only so many brothers and sisters and parents and cousins and people who are interested in football games. And so that's, I think, where the high school's sense of how many people they would draw came from. Not how many rear ends could sit out there, but how many people would they likely draw.
So then was the other issue was around that it's more noise contributing to where there might be some simultaneous noise from another facility, which is a mile or 2, a couple miles away.
I think Phil will say that those distances would mean that the sound as it propagates from De La Salle or the other school would tend to fall off very quickly. And if you're at a game where the PA system is going and people are clapping and shouting at Ignacio, you're not going to hear what's going on over at De La Salle, and even the people in the middle aren't. But I should really say, it's not that you wouldn't notice it. Remember my pitch about the difference between significant impacts and simple effects? Someone could hear it. You might notice it, just like people whose homes face the field beyond the extent of the wall. They might hear people talking, but the question is, does it really rise to that level where it's considered an impact by the city of Concord and by extension by the district? Right?
So,
Could I just
yes,
add one
please do.
comment to that? And I think the other thing is that I think those conditions were taken into account in our existing conditions portion of the analysis and the noise measurements we took. It took into consideration the existing events that are going on, which include the noise from all surrounding uses, whether it's the other high school and school facilities or not. So we based our analysis on a comparison to what those existing conditions are, and have measured whether the project's impact would add to those in a significant fashion.
Mrs. Oaks had some other questions, or Mr. Lawrence, I know. So, Mr.
Talking about that table 3.2, and this may have changed somewhere. On there it says the usage for outside user groups, the table says it ends at 7 p.m. on Saturdays, I believe. But I think in the revisions, I saw it said 6 p.m.
Yes, I have to cop to that mistake on our part. The district did give us 2 footnotes which were intended to be included in this table in the draft, which through the wonders of technology and double-sided copying, we omitted. And so back in the response to comments document, we include the addition of what was essentially a negotiated deal, as I understand it. And I hope I'm describing it accurately here, and Tim or Mitchell can clarify if I'm misdescribing it. But a deal or a negotiated position with the neighbors having to do with constraints on the outside users and when they would and wouldn't use the fields on the weekends. And so that footnote is in there now and is intended to be part of the project.